Good afternoon. Welcome to another segment of the Drexel SEMO Show, a show where we encourage you to rise up and take your position. Today we are going to have a discussion on how government works in the Turks and Caicos Islands. I personally believe that there's a misunderstanding of how government works, and so we want to educate you and also myself, because I need to be educated as well on how it works. And so I thought the best person, in my opinion, I don't want to talk to anyone who's currently a member of any of the political parties. And so I thought the best person would be to speak to about this discussion is Hon Wendall Swann. Hon Wendall Swann is a former Minister of Education, Social Services. He also is the minister that was responsible for initiating the National Insurance Board. Unfortunately, that didn't continue because during his time, his party didn't win, and so it continued at the next general election after the new government came in power. He was also, as far as I can recall, I was in college, but he was also the one responsible for the renaming of the schools for the Turks and Caicos Islands, and he renamed those schools after educators who made a significant contribution to the Turks and Caicos Islands. So today I'm looking forward to the discussion. I want to welcome Hon Swann to my show. Thank you, Hon Swann.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Seymour.
Yeah.
First, let me congratulate you on the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
It's very necessary. We do need a lot of education, particularly in the areas you're working with, because I don't know how much of it we're getting in our formal classrooms.
Right.
I'm not sure that it's your opinion, but I'm not sure that I'm the best person to have this discussion with, but we'll do the best we can, and you and I will learn together.
Okay, sounds good, Hon Swann. So, Hon Swann, let's talk about the process. So, there's an election. The party that wins the most seats becomes the government. That's correct, right?
Right. It's yes. Since we now have registered political parties, it would be the party that has the largest number of seats, elected seats in the legislature.
Right.
That party would then be the leader of that party would then be appointed as the premier.
Premier. Okay.
And then the premier would inform the governor as to who he wants appointed as ministers.
Right.
Yes.
And then the ministers form a cabinet.
Yes.
Okay. What is cabinet?
Cabinet is the group includes the governor as the president.
Mm-hmm.
It includes the attorney general and the ministers.
And the deputy governor.
I'm not sure the deputy governor is a permanent part of cabinet. I think the deputy governor presides at cabinet in the absence of the governor.
Okay.
I'm not sure the deputy
I think
governor.
she now is a permanent. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cabinet. Now, cabinet is supposed to make the majority of the decisions as to policy,
Okay.
as to what happens in government. Cabinet would approve all the legislation before they go to the House of Assembly,
Okay.
unless it is what we call private members' bills. Now, I know we have very little experience with that because somehow over the years we haven't done a lot of that, but
Right.
every member of the House of Assembly has the right to present bills. It's
As
called,
long as it doesn't impact any financial implications, right?
well, I don't know necessarily that is that limitation.
Okay.
But you can present bills for debate, just like you have the government bringing bills to the House of Assembly.
We don't see a lot of that
The
happening.
private members can bring bills for debate if there are provisions in there that are contrary to the Constitution. Well, then, of course,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any limitation.
Okay.
Quite often, in countries where you have that as more of a permanent fixture in government, quite often private members' bills are converted into government bills because they're dealing with issues that ought to be dealt with.
Right. Right. So basically, the cabinet is the center where all the legislation is basically discussed and then sent to the House of Assembly for debate.
Normally, you would have cabinet would approve a draft before it actually goes to the House of Assembly. Now, when bills go to the House of Assembly, they are debated, and the House of Assembly, of course, has the final say. So the government might come and they say X, and then it's debated, and the government realizes, well, no, this is a good idea to amend this according to these.
After they hear arguments and
exactly,
stuff.
Exactly.
So how, based on your experience, your knowledge, how does the legislations get to cabinet? Does the government advise the Attorney General, this is my legislative agenda I want for this year, and then the Attorney General goes away and prepares the documents and then take it to cabinet?
Well, that would be ideal, but I don't think that's the way it's done up to this point.
Okay.
You have a particular department and you have a particular issue in that department. And then heads of departments and the permanent secretary get together and say, I think we need something in this area. The minister would have a policy. Okay, this is the way I want this to go. And then we're going to try and take this policy and translate that into legislation. So the legislation, the draft, the proposals for legislation will come up to cabinet from the permanent secretary in the particular department. And then that'll be debated in cabinet and then finalized and then presented to the House of Assembly.
But shouldn't the minister be the one that's directing the permanent secretary on what they want for the ministry?
Well, the minister's job is to make policy.
Okay.
The permanent secretary's job is to carry out the policy that the minister makes.
Okay.
Now, in the course of making policy, the permanent secretary might have a role as well in advising the minister. Remember, one goes in as a minister, but the permanent secretary might be somebody that's been in that department.
Yes, on a continuity purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
So he or she would have some knowledge, some historical knowledge that the minister could benefit from.
True.
And so, the minister would sit with the permanent secretary and say, I want to do this. And he might be able to say, well, yes, minister, we can do that. Or he might say, well, minister, here is a situation you might come up against because we tried to do this before. And this is, so there needs to be that kind of discussion.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there also needs to be the position where the minister knows the limits of his authority.
Yes.
And the permanent secretary knows the limits of his authority.
Got it.
And as I said, the minister's job is to make policy, not to carry it out.
Right, right.
The permanent secretary's job is to carry out the policy, not to make it.
That's a good distinction.
Exactly.
Yes. Now, in cabinet, though, when I remember attending the constitutional talks, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2019. My understanding is that there must be a consensus. There's no voting, but there must be a consensus among all members. And whatever's discussed in cabinet, it cannot be discussed outside of cabinet.
Well, there's a particular term for that. So it should be that way in most groups. I mean, we have a group, we have an organization, we have a hierarchy, whatever, and we sit to debate a particular issue. I'm for it, you're against it. But at the end of the day, the majority votes against it. I'm not to go out and says, well, I was for it. When we've debated it, we've threshed it all out, whatever decision the majority comes to, that's the majority decision. That's the decision I've got to
support. So that should be normal, you're saying?
That's, yes.
And so when it's time to go to the House of Assembly, then all the persons in cabinet should agree to the bill, basically.
Well, cabinet, when the bill reaches the House of Assembly, cabinet would have already approved the bill that is being presented.
Even though I am as a minister, one of us may not approve it, but I cannot go into the House of Assembly and don't vote.
No. We're supposed to be operating under what is called the Westminster system.
Right.
And traditionally in the Westminster system, if you find that you really can't go along with the government's policy, then you're expected to resign.
Okay.
If you're a minister.
I got it.
But once the government makes a policy, it's the government's policy.
Right.
So if you're part of the government, it's your policy.
Yeah. So you have to. I understand what you're saying. Now, when it comes to, so you say the permanent secretaries are responsible for carrying out the policies.
Right.
So when these policies are enacted and enforced, it's really not up to the politicians to make sure it's enforced.
No. Let me give you an example. I was Minister for Education, and there were a lot of complaints, particularly on Providenciales, about the overcrowding in the schools and the teachers having to take extra time with people who couldn't understand English. So the minister made a policy that anybody whose first language was not English needed to satisfy the principle that he or she can communicate in English at a particular level. The applicant needed to satisfy the principle, right? So the minister makes the policy. The people still complain that the minister needs to do something. Well, what is the minister supposed to do? Go to the gate at the school and keep the children out?
And that is why you
The minister can't do that.
Exactly. And that's why you have people in different roles.
Exactly.
I'm glad you raised that point, because that could be a lot of confusion. I mean, the minister, sets the policy.
Right.
The PS and their department make sure it's carried out and being enforced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What about jobs? A lot of people complain that they're not getting hired, especially when it comes to key positions in government. They feel that some Turks and Caicos Islanders are not getting opportunity. Whose responsibility is it to hire individuals? How does that work?
Well, we have first of all, the governor is responsible for appointments in the civil service.
The governor?
The governor, up to a particular level. I think there are appointments like the Attorney General,
Minister, Permanent Secretary of Finance?
No, Permanent Secretary of Finance, the magistrates, and those are appointed, they're in a different category altogether. But generally speaking, people are appointed through the process of the Public Service Commission. And the politicians are not responsible. In our current system, we don't have a minister of the civil service. In other countries, you might have that. You have a minister of the civil service. You might also have the position where the Attorney General is an elected person. In our system, though, we don't have those two issues. So the governor is still responsible rather than the politicians. So So blaming the politicians for who gets hired in the civil service is not necessarily right, because they don't really have that kind of authority.
But okay, I know it goes through the Public Service Commission,
Right?
but doesn't it have to be ratified at the cabinet level?
No,
It doesn't have to be?
no. The cabinet doesn't have a say, well, from my experience, cabinet doesn't have a say in who gets hired in the civil service. That's strictly, and too bad we don't have the Constitution here.
Yeah.
That's strictly a matter for the governor's office to deal with appointments to the public service.
I got it.
While we're on this topic, though, I should say this. And I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but
No matter what you say, you might get in trouble. But don't worry about that.
I feel I have to say it. Turks and Caicos Islanders can no longer expect to be appointed to positions simply because we're Turks and Caicos Islanders.
I agree with you.
We've got to make sure that that we're capable of handling the position that we aspire to.
Yeah.
We've got to prepare ourselves to do that.
Absolutely, because if we go in those positions and we cannot do the job and we fail, then the entire Turks and Caicos Islands will be labeled as incompetent.
Exactly. And so my advice to persons who want to reach certain positions is to make sure you learn as much as you can about the responsibilities of that position. Make sure you learn as much as you can about the legal framework in that position, and make sure you don't do anything outside of that legal framework. Because you see, if you have somebody above you that direct you to do something that's wrong, and you decide that you're going to do it because, oh, I want to keep my job, you are never going to be qualified for that job.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
So you've got to get to the point where you're confident enough in yourself to say, no, I will not do that because that isn't right.
Right. You know what.
And until you can do that, you can't get to that.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
That's just the way that is.
Yeah. You need to know what you're doing and what the rules are. You need to know that because you may end up doing something illegally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
You're absolutely right.
Or maybe even worse than illegally stupid.
Yeah. I don't want to say that, but I remember many, many years ago, you wrote an article. I probably just came back from college, I guess. And you were mentioning the role of politicians. You're trying to educate us, and I remember 2 points. I know you said 3 points.
I certainly do remember.
But I can't remember the third point. The 2 points I remember that you said that the politician's role is to enact legislations, and the second rule is to provide financing for capital expenditure and for the recurring.
Right.
I remember you saying that that's the rule.
Right.
But I believe a lot of us believe that that there are more things that politicians should be doing that they're not doing.
Well, I think it's very easy for politicians, particularly once you become a minister. It's very easy for you to get lost. If you have somebody who's made a minister who doesn't have the kind of confidence in himself, he's going to rely almost entirely on his permanent secretary.
Gotcha.
And if his permanent secretary isn't somebody of the utmost integrity, they can make a nonsense out of the ministry.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
On the other hand, you don't want to have a minister that is so full of himself that he doesn't have time to listen to the.
Yeah.
You know, there's got to be a balance.
Yes.
As I said earlier, you've got to know where your responsibility ends and the other guy needs to know where his responsibility ends.
Yes.
And then you'd have a,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
a smooth situation.
Right.
There's not absolutely everything that happens in a department the minister necessarily needs to know
Yeah.
about.
And sometimes they don't know.
Well, there are things, there may be things that they ought to know about that
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah.
And then there are things that they know about they don't necessarily need to.
Yeah. That's why you delegate.
But again, it's that it's that balance where I'm confident enough in myself to know this is my rule.
Yeah.
And that is your rule. And if the minister feels that his policy is not being properly carried out, then he should be complaining very loudly
Yeah.
to the governor.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what about, we're almost finished, but what about work permits? Because ministers get blamed a lot for issuing work permits. Is that under the direct discretion of a minister, or is the board responsible for that?
Well, we have boards that are charged with deciding application for work permits. It comes back again to where we started. The minister is responsible for making the policy. So when one goes to a department and you have people in that department that may be doing strange stuff in the name of policy, they're doing that in the name of the minister.
Because the minister's one who...
Because whatever policy is carried out is the minister's policy.
Got it.
So ministers need to be careful. They need to know what people are doing in their name. As to work permits specifically, the minister should not be involved in deciding who gets a work permit because we've created boards. Now, the minister is responsible under the law to issue certain directives to the boards. It's not that you shouldn't give John Brown a work permit, but okay, for the next year, we're not going to have any work permits in this area.
Right.
That's legitimate for the minister to give that direction.
But not individual people.
Exactly.
I got you.
Right.
And I guess the same thing is about scholarships. You have a board for scholarships.
Right.
That's responsible for that. The ministry allocates the money for the
Right.
scholarship and hands it over to the scholarship board, and they have,
Right.
in my understanding, there's a priority list.
Right. Going back to what you were referring to earlier, the minister is to go to bat and fight for the resources for the scholarship board, let's say.
Got it.
But once the money is decided in the budget, his role, as far as that goes, is ended. Then it's for his board to decide how the money is going to be administered.
Got it.
The minister would have a policy. Okay, we want to train people in this area. So this is how this field becomes a priority as opposed to this field. Because looking at the future, we want to have this type of people in the country.
Got it. Yeah.
One of our problems, though, Mr. Seymour, I should mention, we send off people for training in particular areas. And sometimes it's almost impossible to get them back.
Yeah. Even in the country, you mean?
Yeah. I remember talking with the head of faculty at the university, Florida A&M University. And he said to me, I can train more people than you can send to me. But my question to you is, when I've trained them, how are you going to get them back in Turks and Caicos?
Yeah. Especially when it's school in the U.S. and U.K.
That's a serious question.
Yeah.
You know, when you graduate from a particular university in a particular field, and you can immediately get a job anywhere in the United States, for example, where your starting salary is going to be $100,000, to come back here and you're looking at your starting salary of 18. I mean.
Yeah. But you know, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up because at the end of the day, what really should be mattered to us is our patriotism to Turks and Caicos Islands.
Well,
I think a lot of us are not patriotic to our country.
Well, again, it comes down to this kind of thing. What's our country worth to us?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we can blame
the individuals,
the next generation, because the next generation is what we've made them.
Wow. Wow.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. You got me on that one. You got me. Wow. Honorable Swann, is there anything else you think that I have not asked you?
Well,
in terms of how government works, that think we should cover?
Well, let me say it like this: when this is aired and you get the feedback, maybe you can have me back again, and we can go over those areas that we get criticized on.
Sounds like a good plan. Well,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, with that said, I just want to thank you, Honorable Swann, and this was very informative to me, and I'm quite sure to our viewers, on how government works in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and all those people who are even planning to become politicians. I hope this is informative to them as well, because sometimes people believe once they become a politician, they'll just go make noise and they get things done. But that's not how it works. They can make noise, but that's not how it works. They have different departments that are led by permanent secretaries who are responsible for carrying out those policies.
Right. That's a whole other subject again. That sometime in the future perhaps we can look at.
Right. Well, thank you again for watching the Drexel SEMA show. I hope now you're able to rise up and take your position. Thank you.